ball at
In the
Tech.
county, nobody plays. Nobody. The Little League goes all the way up. Nobody plays in the county. I mean, at that age.
You guys take it when you're ready, Todd.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to ask you a couple of general questions.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think is interesting about advertising? What attracted you to it in the first place?
Well, I was getting ready to graduate from the University of Virginia, so it was a week between the end of class and graduation, so I got out the Washington Post and I opened it up to the want ads. The one thing I knew how to do was type, and so I found an ad for advertising agency receptionist. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. I was an art history major. There must be something that matches there. So I went to work. I got this job as a receptionist in an advertising agency. Well, once I got there, I realized that was really where I was meant to be. And the reason is because of the creativity. You need creativity in almost any job you have. You probably even need creativity in math jobs because that's what drives innovation is creativity. And I can't imagine having any kind of job that didn't have an element of creativity to it because that's what keeps things interesting. And advertising is the incubator for creativity.
Great answer. Tell me about what you did in your career here in Roanoke before you became the poster child for economic.
Yeah, right. So I had worked in Washington for several years in advertising, and I decided to get married. And my husband my husband-to-be worked here in Roanoke for the Roanoke Times. So I had to find an advertising job in Roanoke, and so I sent resumes and inquiries out all over town, and I never got a bite. I never even got a thanks but no thanks, except for John Lambert. John Lambert had started a small agency just a year or two before that, and I was probably his third or fourth employee here in Roanoke. So I got married and I had a job when I got here, and so I spent about 1979 to 1990 working at John Lambert Associates, and I had a variety of jobs, starting as a copywriter and going up to creative director. I did a lot of work in healthcare, mostly hospitals, and in economic development. So but they both interested me, both of those fields, but I made contacts in economic development that I eventually just went to work for one of the clients, which was the Roanoke Regional Partnership, and I've been there. So I worked there for 10 years. A year after I got there as marketing director, the executive director left, then I became executive director, and then in 1999 I went to work for the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce as president, which is also an economic development job, even though it's a membership organization. And then after 10 years there, I went back to the Roanoke Regional Partnership again as executive director. So I've spent more years in economic development, community development than I did in advertising, but I think the lessons that I learned and the creativity that I developed in advertising specifically translate to those other fields, because a lot of what that is about communication and developing new ways to get different results.
What do you think, what is the benefit of a strong creative community, of a strong group of creative minds in a community like Roanoke?
Well, creativity is a driver of innovation. So any community needs that creative backbone that drives innovation, that drives progressive thinking, drives new ideas. So here in the Roanoke region, that creative community has more influence than it probably even realizes that it does, because it is, an incubator of creativity, a spark for creative thinking, and that translates, to the creative everybody the creative community comes in contact with, and that's how ideas are born, and that's how ideas transform places.
I also think it's interesting that a lot of our creative people, because Roanoke's, the nature of Roanoke, they have the opportunity to be influential in other
Mhm.
areas. You know, John Creasy was an amazingly influential man in the city. You know, that goes off about once a day. We've actually offered to pay for that.
There was one that was off at my office today too.
I mean, you know, you know, the John Will Creasy's, the John Lambert, you know.
Don't put John Lambert in the...
It's John Will Creasy, Howard, Cabell Brand are people who are advertising people. John's just interesting.
He is interesting. I think John Lambert was much more of a public relations oriented guy, and I always felt like, you know, we did advertising because that's what Judith and I wanted to do, and, you know, and then other people joined too. But you know, he really was very accommodating to us because he knew that's what we liked to do, and he helped us grow in that profession. But he was more of a strategic communicator, crisis management guy, absolutely. And if you go back and look at all kinds of things, from the Smart Road to the renovation of Hotel Roanoke to the companies like Carillion and Roanoke Gas and others, John was involved with all those companies at critical junctures.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
you know, that's not really advertising, but
it's all
it's
kind of
communication, and it's creative communication in most cases too.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can separate advertising in a city like Roanoke. Maybe in a big city you can in DC, but I don't think you can separate advertising, public relations, and even media itself.
Right.
Because those three things have to work together.
Well, nor should you. Yeah, I mean, like you said, they have to work together, nor should you separate them. You know, you have to, it's not just one flavor or one trick. It's an integrated program of moving minds and bodies.
Do you have any recollection of when the Hotel Roanoke was shuttered, and when they were looking at it, and the activity of the way the community rallied around that? I mean, I know you were probably living in the area.
Right, no, absolutely, because I've lived here since 1979, and I remember the day they announced. In fact, I remember, I think, sitting in a staff meeting at John Lambert Associates when talking about that they had just announced they were closing the hotel. But, you know, you travel all over the country, really. And when you tell people that you're from Roanoke, one of the first things they say is, oh, I went to the Hotel Roanoke one time. I spent the night at Hotel Roanoke. Is Hotel Roanoke still there? You know, it is such an icon for this community and for the region. And it's restoration and continued success. It's been a long time now since it was restored. Its continued success is really built on the strength of it as a symbol of the community. And it wouldn't work if the people who lived here didn't recognize that and believe in it. And so, you know, when John Lambert was involved in raising that last $5 million, which came out of the citizens' pockets, and I think, going back, I think if you looked at it, you'd see that money was raised in a remarkable amount of time, and that was because of the strength of Hotel Roanoke as a symbol of this community.
You had a really, really great team when you had you and Judith and Brett LeGue and Robin, and I would put that up against just about any team who's worked here, even the Howard teams of the 50s, which had some wonderful people.
Yeah.
Almost all of those people ended up staying in Roanoke for a very long term, if not the rest of their careers. What do you think about Roanoke? What is it about Roanoke that you have people who have transcendent talent that could go to work at big agencies, big cities, or whatever, yet they stay here? Why do you think people choose to do that? You're certainly someone who would have opportunities. Of course, I know Doug's here very much.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a trade. I think Roanoke is the great, balancing act or trade-off between a quality of life that is so strong. It's such an easy place to live. It's such an, I had 4 children and I was able to work full time and raise 4 children. You can't do that a lot of places. So it has a very strong quality of life. It has a great environment, not only from the idea of environmentally clean air, clean water, but it's just beautiful. It's such a pleasant place to live from an aesthetic standpoint. So I think that I find that people who decide they want to stay here and have really superior creative talent or whatever kind of talent, they have to work a little bit harder to find the opportunities, but the trade-off is worth it to continue to find opportunities, to be challenged, to be able to create great work and great outcomes. I think it's the perfect balancing act here.
Can you think of any local advertising campaigns or?
No, I can't. I saw that on the list. Honest to God, I can't think of one.
Yeah,
I really can't. Isn't
all
that
right.
sad?
I'm gonna test you here.
I know who the person is, though.
Can you sing the Valleydale jingle?
Oh no, I don't think I can.
Oh.
I think that was a little. I mean, it was on. I think it's so old. It was probably long before my time.
It recurred though.
Yeah, it did. No, it did recur. Yeah.
Yeah,
I do remember the dance, the marching pigs. Yeah, but
Yeah.
Everybody say, "Oh, hell for Valleydale." I know that much.
That's great.
Who did that? Who did that campaign?
I don't even know. Poindexter did it for a while, and Bretland, you said that he had done some things for it, but I don't even know.
Oh, I think it goes way back.
It does. There's a black and white.
I bet it
on
goes to
YouTube.
Claude Harrison or something like that.
I'm betting too.
Yeah.
Dale Poindexter's gonna come in next week. I'll bet he can tell me. So, I think you've just about covered everything I need, and you've given me some wonderful stuff. Any parting thoughts on the value on the importance of a strong advertising community? I know we spoke more broadly about creative.
I think in Roanoke, Roanoke is always bigger than it should be. Because it's the largest metropolitan area in the western half of the state, it has a business, commercial, medical infrastructure that's much larger than you would expect for a metropolitan area even of 300,000 people. And I think that advertising is exactly the same way. That if you just looked at the Roanoke market on its own, you would think that it might be a little bit of a crowded field, and particularly going back historically. But it's not, because it serves a much broader area. It's a magnet for business in the Roanoke region, and whether you're talking about financial infrastructure, medical infrastructure, or an advertising infrastructure, I think it's deceivingly strong and deceivingly large.
I have one other question for you, and this actually comes a little bit before your time, so if you're not comfortable with it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to wait for that beeping to go away.
Yeah. Did you have Howard in?
Huh?
Did you have Howard in?
Howard's next week. We're
that'll
trying
be
to figure
good.
out whether we can. There's a lot of people we need to go to. John, Bill Houck Sr. is still alive. He's in his 90s.
Wow.
But still sharp in Valdosta, Georgia. So
Uh-huh.
how we get there is but I'm going to get there. We got to
Yeah.
figure out. The community college has indicated that they might be willing to go over and take him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And so I might
Yeah.
skin it that way, but
Oh, wow, that'd be great.
the Fisher, who did a lot of the advanced auto stuff when they were moving from a regional to a national chain. He's living in a nursing home, but still sharp and willing to do that.
Oh, good.
Do you have
It's a great project.
Oh, it's so much fun for me, and the other day we talked to Bob Kinsey, who was telling us about installing the Roanoke Star.
I've heard that story. Yeah,
the
that's
best
cool.
thing he said was at the end of it, and I hope it came out clean. He said, "I can't even imagine how many permits that would take these days."
That's right.
For a reason that I can't figure out, there was an astounding number of strong advertising women like Julie McDowell, Mamie Vest, Claire Maddox. You know, Claire Maddox was running a relatively significant agency at a time where most women were in typing pools in big cities. And how do you think that why do you think that women were so significant in this market before it was really a trendy thing?
I'd have to think about that. Well, I think in general, I don't know that that's true. I think Roanoke's a land of opportunity. I think that people who are exceptional, people who are driven, can make the career they want to make in Roanoke. I really believe that. I don't think I would have lasted here for, how long have I been here? 34 years? I don't think I would have lasted here for 34 years if I couldn't recognize opportunities that presented themselves. So I think maybe if you go back to, Julie or Mamie or Claire, that they had that drive to succeed. And Roanoke, I think, always has been and will be the kind of place where you can make that happen if you have the drive.
That's great.
So.
I would love to hear her best Joan Lambert story. I don't know if we have
All
time
right.
for that.
Yeah, I have lots of. I have some of them that I probably can't say. I think my favorite one is so he starts this agency, and Judith Shelburne was the first person that he hired, and Judith, instead of having an art desk, worked on a card table. So she had to do, and that was the day when you did paste up. You waxed type, you sent the type out, you got it set, you waxed it up, and you had to cut it and paste it and put it down, and she did it on a card table instead of on a desk with real equipment.
Remember press type?
Oh yeah. Well, I when I got that job as the receptionist in Washington, I made it my business. Once I got there, I realized I like this. I like this. I didn't know what I liked. I thought I wanted to be a museum curator. And so I got there, and I made it my business to learn how to do everything that they did in that office. I learned how to write copy. I learned how to do layouts and paste ups. I learned how to buy media, and so I learned all that stuff. I thought press type was like the greatest thing ever.
That's one of the amazing things is how much this industry's changed. When I got here, there were 4 working type houses. There's not another type house in 500 miles
Right.
now.
Do they even have type houses anymore?
I think there are a couple of foundries, and their main purpose is to create typefaces. It's
Uh-huh.
not to
Right.
set type. But,
Oh yeah, and you had to. I remember when we got the fax machine. The fax machine was like a huge deal because the guy didn't have to come to the office and pick up the envelope of specced up type to take it to the type house and then bring it back. That you could fax it over there, and then they only had to bring it one way.
I worked for Associated Advertising. We had one of the first fax machines in Roanoke because we had Alamo Savings Bank and Joe Eanes when he left First National Exchange Bank.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
SNL. I still sometimes call credit unions SNLs.
Well, that's another interesting thing. I mean, the impact of FNEB and Dominion. I mean, they did a lot of advertising. It was largely created here, I think, until toward the end, and that kept a lot of people busy. That's a significant part of the advertising history, I think, in the Roanoke Valley.
Sure, and how Advance goes from being a local to a Fortune 500 company. But it was interesting to me, all this consolidation. Although I can't complain, we do fine. But all this consolidation, when I was first started, it was almost your God-given right for hanging out an an agency shingle that you would get a car dealer, a hospital, and a bank. And there were just so many.
It's not any different than Mad Men. I mean, they still have, in Mad Men, they have a holy grail on there, too. So it was the same kind of thing. It was just the way advertising worked, back in those days. But, yeah, that fax machine transformed advertising. I remember when I first started working, you used carbon paper. You didn't waste the copy machine on making copies of things. You use carbon paper, and it was like really exciting because where I worked the carbon paper was connected to the paper, as opposed to having to take carbon paper and then put the paper on and then make sure it all stuck together and stuff. That was like really high tech. It sounds like I worked with, Annie Oakley.
My first job was on a typewriter. I said I was probably the last writer whose first job was on a typewriter.
Yeah, well, I love that Selectric typewriter. And except Robin Chalkley, he used Sparko legal pads. Sparko writes great, Sparko by 8. That was Robin's jingle for the Sparko legal pads. And he wrote everything out by hand. And I started doing that, writing copy hand. But then once that Selectric came along, man, I just typed and typed. And I'd type it over and over and over again until I got it the way I wanted it.
Yeah, Robin's incredible. I've already told Robin he's got to come up and get interviewed. I'm not sure it tops the card table, but when I got hired at Associated, they had 3. I think we're done. They had 3 bad copywriter experiences in a row, and they decided
That's because they didn't hire me.
It probably is.
I didn't